This is the moment the menu thinks it's about freedom. A chef finally creates without ego. A woman finally eats without fear, and the film finally exhales. But look closer. This isn't a victory. It's an escape. One that cost her nothing. Margot never risks what the film is truly about, being consumed. Everyone in the menu is devouring something, art, status, even each other. But the only thing no one tastes is themselves. Hi, I'm Griffin the Architect, and in this essay we're going to look at how a few small changes could turn the menu's clever finale into a true emotional crescendo. We'll start by examining what Julian Slovic and Margot Mills want, what they need, and why their final exchange, while delicious, leaves us hungry for something more. I first saw the menu and thought it was airtight, one of those single location stories that hits like a punch, efficient, focused, perfectly plated. But on rewatch, something was missing, not in the craft, but in the heart. The two main players in this story are Julian Slovic and Margot Mills, real moniker Aaron. If you're at all familiar with Enneagrams, I would define Julian as a typical type 3 with a 4 wing, and Margot as a type 6 wing 5. Put extremely simply, Julian is a perfectionist achiever, desperate to be loved not just for his work, but for his soul. Margot is a cautious but loyal woman who can perform intimacy but lives detached. To engage with how we can strengthen the emotional climax of this film, we have to define a couple key elements. Number 1, what do both Julian and Margot want? Number 2, what do both Julian and Margot truly need? On the surface, Julian's want is to execute his final menu in perfect order. He sees it as his magnum opus and wants it to go off without a hitch. On top of that, he wants atonement, vengeance, and liberation from his oppressors. Margot simply wants to survive the night. The tragedy of both of their stories comes from their needs and their inability to recognize them before it's too late. The film heavily hints at Margot and Julian being two sides of the same coin. Firstly, they both sell intimacy for survival. Slovic sells emotional and sensory intimacy through food, manufacturing transcendence for those who can afford it. Margot sells physical and emotional intimacy, performing desire and comfort for those who can afford it. He cooks for people who will never love him removed from his art. She sleeps with people who will never see her removed from her body. Both secretly despise the people they serve, yet continue to serve them. This culminates in resentment to those who they depend on for their livelihoods because they loathe them for consuming them, and they loathe that they continue offering themselves to be consumed. This particularly is what I think Julian recognizes in Margot. The entire film is built on a dialectic: artistry versus consumption, meaning versus performance, devotion versus exploitation. We see these dichotomies and internal workings vividly in Julian, but they tend to fall flat when it comes to Margot. This would explain why the climax felt as if it partly hinged on nostalgia, as opposed to two mirrored characters confronting the beliefs that create their emotional makeup. What could Margot reveal or risk that would truly give Slovic the release he's literally murdering for? What could Slovic confront in her that would force her to stop hiding behind detachment? To answer these questions, I believe it is here that it's best we go back and make a slight alteration to the story's trajectory. Margot and Tyler's relationship is initially introduced to us in a somewhat ambiguous way. We are left to infer that they're simply a couple embarking on a couple's adventure to Hawthorne. It is also clear that Tyler is much more invested in Hawthorne and food in general than Margot is. What I suggest altering from this point moving forward is that we rarely see Margot make attempts to connect emotionally with Tyler. Tyler can even play into it more to give the illusion that he is equally as interested in her. We can still have it revealed down the line that Margot is actually an escort, but we now infer that Margot may see Tyler differently than she sees the rest of her clients. That she may have developed feelings for him as a repeat client over the years and is possibly envisioning some form of future with him. By giving Margot a glimpse of genuine connection before the betrayal, her detachment later stops being a personality trait that she developed through her job and becomes a wound that needs healing. Even the reveal that he actually invited someone else can be altered to keep Margot suspended in disbelief. This alteration serves a strong purpose in the emotional through line of the film. Margot, just like Julian, is now actively demonstrating her own personal pursuit of encountering a connection where she believes she doesn't have to perform to be accepted. A connection where she's not simply being consumed. A connection where she can prove to herself that it may be possible to be loved simply for who she is. This is exactly what Julian is looking for in his cooking and in his life. Appreciation for who he is removed from his art, and love for that version of himself despite his flaws. Now, with that change, Margot and Julian are actually running parallel to each other emotionally in the film. When it is finally revealed that Tyler brought her along knowing everyone would die, it doesn't just land as a sad plot twist, it becomes a dark night of the soul for Margot. The moment when she sees her dreams of genuine connection and not being consumed not only turn into dust, but become almost a joke for her to have even thought otherwise. Now she is exactly where Julian is, a possible point of true despair, realizing that her need will never be fulfilled. Now that she's reached the depths of the dungeon, there will be two key points that bring her back to the light and lead directly into our climax. Tyler's desperation for approval, leading to his humiliation and suicide, rings truer to her pursuit as well. She sees what that lack of self-love led him to. And although she may have scoffed at that desperation throughout the film, she now realizes that she had been no different. This point is further emphasized when Elsa tries to kill her out of fear she is being replaced. Both of their senses of self exist outside of them, contingent on another, and she was no different. Julian is no different. Even his suicide required an audience to be valid. With that minor change, we now reach our climax. Margot still stands up and declares that she doesn't like the food, a masterstroke. But now that request is what it should be, the climax of the plot, as well as the emotional climax for not only our antagonist, but also our protagonist. Julian is a man who has resolved to kill everyone in attendance. Therefore, once she makes this request, he doesn't immediately soften. He bites back. He sees her. He knows that she wants connection, but has grown terrified of being used, consumed, and discarded just like Tyler discarded her. When Margot asks for the burger, Slovik tries to consume her. As he cooks, he narrates, "You think you're different? You came here to serve, not to eat. But everyone hungers to be known by the one who feeds them." Each line slowly tempts her back into the dynamic she spent the entire film facing and overcoming. The dynamic Julian himself feels imprisoned by. Just like the original, we still see glimpses of him breaking as he lets a smile slip as he prepares the perfect burger. But she doesn't slip. She's passed his first test. Julian brings her the burger. As he stands watching and waiting for her approval, subconsciously mirroring the dynamic he wants to escape. The dynamic of being praised for his art rather than appreciated for feeding someone, nourishing someone. She snaps him from this cycle by dismissing him. She reminds him that he has other guests to attend to, removing the grandeur from the moment and making it mundane. We see him slip again, silent approval. He bows and moves on back into the kitchen. When she takes her first bite of the burger, we really hone in on her experience. This is where Julian expects her to break. For a moment, she does feel just like all the other guests, overwhelmed by the greatness he's presented her. She wants to fawn over it, but she holds her composure. He watches her from afar, waiting for her moment of surrender. When pleasure erases boundary and she becomes yet another disciple of his, consumed by him just like the rest. However, it is at this moment where the original film made a fantastic writing decision. She declares that she's full and wants to take the rest to go. This moment is brilliant because the burger represented his roots, feeding for joy, love, and most importantly, sustenance instead of perfection. However, he can't help but to see it as another tool of the cycle he's trapped himself in, another tool for creating yet another worshiper, and in his mind, another oppressor. Yet no matter how perfect the burger was, it still only performed one duty to Margot, to feed her, not to evoke worship, and it wasn't even perfect at that. It was too much. That ability for her to figure out how to momentarily heal Julian and provide him what he really needed is what saves her life. She also has circumvented his expectations and her own weaknesses. She received his intimacy, his purest form, an intimacy she didn't know she wanted but desperately needed, and she didn't allow it to consume her. He gets to create one last time, authentically and joyfully, only to nourish and not to impress. She affirms to herself that she no longer needs to live in fear of being consumed by a pure intimacy, and for both, that's freedom. I want to thank you if you've made it this far and insist that you like and subscribe. Please don't hesitate to share your thoughts and opinions in the comments section, but do so respectfully. How would you rewrite this scene? Please let me know. I'd love for this page to become a community for those who simply love the art of story. It's my first video, and the purpose of this page is to take story moments that are good and figure out if we can make it great. That is the way of the architect. I plan to drop bi-weekly, so be sure to tune in next time. Have a great one.